Hello, it's Wednesday, September 23rd, and the problem of the day is Mr. Toledo wants to know who has the greatest amount of pizza and who has the least amount. He wants to organize the amount from least to greatest. Copy their models in your journal, label each in standard form, and order them from least to greatest. Okay, let's pause here for a minute and look over our different models. We're going to start with Edgar. As you can see, we have one whole and two hundredths. So how would we write that? 1 and 2 hundredths. We move on to Oliver, who has one whole and 2 tenths. How would we write that? 1 whole and 2 tenths. Now we have Juan, who has 3 wholes and 5 hundredths. 3 and 5 hundredths. We have Jason, who has 2 wholes, 1/10, and 3 hundredths. How would we write this? 2 and 13 hundredths. Now we have to order these from least to greatest. We can see that Juan has the largest number, followed by Jason, Oliver, and Edgar. So we know that Edgar has the smallest number. Next would be Oliver, followed by Jason, and our greatest number is Juan with 3 and 5 hundredths.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Pulido. I want to go ahead and add a little bit here. I want you guys to notice that the difference between Edgar and Oliver, right? Although both of these numbers, right, look very similar, there's actually a big difference. Most students, when they look at these digits, they tend to think that Oliver is actually smaller because it only has 2 digits in place. When we're looking at Edgar here, it has 3. So what that means is for Oliver, even though it's actually not there, you have to understand that 2/10, meaning 2/10 rods, is actually the equivalence of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 2/10 is the exact same thing as 20. Therefore, we know that even though the 0 is not there, that actually doesn't mean that it does not exist. So you have to remember that you can actually put the invisible 0 there. So 2/10 represents 2/20. And now that you're looking at the difference between Edgar and Oliver, Edgar is at $1.02, while Oliver is at $1.20. Let's go ahead and move on to today's objective. We didn't even write it down.
The objective of the day is today I will compare and order numbers up to 7 digits, including decimals up to the hundredths, and convert word form to expanded notation utilizing a place value chart. Our process steps for converting a word form number to expanded notation are: Step 1. Identify and label the place value for each individual digit. Step 2. Place each digit in the corresponding place value on the chart. Step 3. Write it in expanded notation.
Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Working on an example. So again, today we're going to be working with word form, and we're going to convert that into expanded notation. That means that we're going to grab a word number and we're going to put it in expanded notation. So as Mr. Pulido mentioned earlier, we are going to need to follow the steps, but before we do that, we're going to read the problem, which says, which expression means the same as 6/100, 3/10, 7/10, and 2/100. Okay, so now that I've read the question, I'm going to go ahead and follow my steps. And step number 1, it says to identify and label the place value for each individual digit. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to label each individual digit. So the 6 is in the hundreds, so I'm going to label this and say that the hundreds look like this. The tens look like that. The tens has a decimal, so it's 0.110. And then the hundreds will look like 0.01. So there, step 1 is just to label the place value for each individual digit. So that's step 1. Step 2, place each digit in the corresponding place value on the chart. So I'm going to place each digit in the chart. So what that means is I'm going to start right here with the number 6, right here, and I'm going to place it in my chart. Well, I have 2 clues that are going to help you figure out where in the chart to put it. The first clue is the label that you place on top, and the second clue is the word form right below that. So I can tell just by looking at it that if it's in the 100 and it's in the hundreds, well, I know it's not tens, ones, tens. Here's hundreds. And there's also a clue because I can see it in standard form and I can see it in word form. So I know that the number 6 belongs in that particular spot in the place value chart. So I'm finished with the 600s. I'm going to move on with the 3/10s. And again, there's 2 clues, the 10 and word form, which is here and here. And it's a 3 that belongs in that particular value. Moving on to the next one, I need 7/10. Now, if you notice here, right, the tens has a THS at the end, which means that that's actually going to be in place in the decimal values. So I know that I can see my decimal here, and anything to the right is going to be decimal form. So all I need to do is look for the tens word, which is here, or the numerical representation. So I know that I'm going to need 7/10 in that particular spot. And lastly, move on to the next. 2 in the hundreds. Again, this is a very important part. THS, hundreds, and I need 2 of them in there. So here's the hundreds, THS, and I need 2 of those, 200s. Now I want you to notice something very important here. If you've noticed, I left a blank spot. What that means is that you're going to need to go in there and fill in that gap with a 0. Even though there might be a digit there, it still actually represents as 630 and 72 hundreds. If I were to just leave it blank, then that would be a very hard or very difficult number to say. So you want to make sure you include the 0. So that's step 2. And then the last step is we want to write it in expanded notation, right? Expanded notation, again, we've been working on it all week. To do expanded notation, you always want to start with the largest or the greatest digit in your number. In this case, it's a 6. So open bracket, start with the 6, times, and again, it's in the 100 spot. So times 100, close bracket. You're done with the first one. Let's move on to the next digit. Don't forget your plus, because you're combining numbers, you're composing numbers. And the next digit is a 3. So I'm going to bring down my 3 times, and this is in the 10 spot, so times 10. plus, open bracket, move on to the next digit. What do you notice here? There's a 0. Every time there's a 0 in expanded notation, you actually do not need to represent it because any 0 times anything is always going to give you a 0, so there's no reason to do so. Moving on, my next digit is a 7. So 7 times, and that's in the 10th spot, so times 0.1, close bracket, and let's go ahead and finish the last one. It's a 2 times the hundredths place, so you place it as such. And you're finished. That is the 3 steps that you need to work on today. Now we're going to let Mr. Toledo come explain number 3.
No, creí que estaban con...
So the next problem, which expression means the same as 9 hundredths, 3 tenths, 5 ones, 1 tenth, 3 hundredths? Well, again, label each one of the values. So let's do that. 9 hundredths. So I'm going to put the hundreds right there. Next, 3 tenths. The tenths, the ones. Over here it says the tenths, so tenths is 0, that, and 1. The hundredths, 0, decimal point, 0, and 1s. I already got my values. So number 1 is done. Place each digit in the place value chart. So 9 hundredths again. I see the decimal point right here. I'm gonna put the decimal point just to guide me. Ones, tenths, and hundreds. So I got 9 hundredths. I put the 9 right there. The next is 3 tenths. It belongs here. And the tenths. And 5 ones. 5 ones. The next is 110, so I will put the 110 right here. Finally and lastly is the 3 hundredths. So hundreds place is right here. So we got the second one. Now is to write it in expanding notation. And we always start from the greatest amount. In this case is the 9 hundredths. And so on, we work down to the hundredths. Open a parenthesis. Maybe I change colors here, hopefully. Start with the 9 times, it's in the hundreds place. So multiply by 100. Close the parenthesis. Plus, open the parenthesis. Now we go with the 3 and the tenths. So 3 times is in the tenths. So close it. Plus, next is the 5 times is in the ones. So times 1. Plus, now we got 110. So it's 1 times. Look, I was 110, 0.1, close it. And the last one is 3 hundredths. 3 times 0, that, or decimal, 0, 1. So we got the last step. And remember, we also can change this to 1 times, what is it? 110. The other one can be, I'm going to put it here on top, 3 times 100. Either way it works.